let me lay out some of the pieces of this puzzle, because there's some the political pieces to this puzzle, because there's actually some big pieces here. Probably one of the biggest is the Republican talking point that President Obama is a big spending liberal who has taken the $11 trillion debt that George W. Bush left us with, or actually I think it was $9.7 trillion debt, and run it up to 11, 12, coming on 13 trillion, that he's exploding the debt. Now, you and I both know, if you've listened to this program at all over the years, you and I both know that that's not true. That the reason why the annual deficit is so large, just looking at the deficit is the annual shortfall between income and expenses. The reason the deficit is so large is basically four things. Medicare can't negotiate for prescription drugs. You could fix Medicare's problems with that. Somehow the conservatives never mention that, and frankly, most of the Democrats won't mention that on TV. But that's the elephant in the room with Medicare. Number one. Number two, the Bush tax cuts. Each one of these accounts for about a quarter of the total the annual deficit. The Bush tax cuts, that accounts for about a quarter of the annual deficit. The recession accounts for about a quarter of the annual deficit. In other words, if we can get people working again, bring our jobs back home, change our trade policies, we'd have the entire deficit wiped out, frankly. And number four, we've got these wars going on in the Middle East that there was never any provision established to pay for them. George Bush declared these wars on the assumption that they would pay for themselves, and multiple people in his administration. And when his Office of Management and Budget Director came out and said, well, it looks like it might cost a couple $100 billion, they fired him. Remember that? So those are the four things. So anyhow, that's the reality. But the perception among low information voters, and keep in mind that the political calculus that the White House is playing on this thing, for better or for worse, and these guys do this for a living, and they think they know what they're talking about, and they may be right. I'm willing to acknowledge that they may be right. I think they're wrong, but they may be right, and we'll find out. But the political calculus that they're playing is that this election is going to be decided by the low information voters, the people who are just marginally paying attention and really don't know what the hell is going on. And beating the president over the head over and over and over again with this, he's a big spending liberal, he's a big spending liberal, look at the size of the debt, look at the size of the deficit, look at the... What he did is he just took that club away from them. In fact, by saying, it's just, we're not even raising taxes, even on rich people. We're just cutting in a program. Okay, he took that club away from them. Now, that's the political calculus. Now, here's why it's a mistake, in my opinion. Because we're in a recession, and when you cut spending during a recession of any kind, keep in mind, 20% more or less of the entire federal economy, of the entire economy of the United States, is federal spending. When you cut spending, and then you add state spending and things like that, and a lot of that is coming through block grants from the federal government or via the federal government, it's about almost a third, 30% of the total budget, or of the total GDP. When you cut programs, when you cut spending, setting aside the morality of it, and there's a considerable issue with regard to the morality of it, but when you cut spending, what you do is you stop putting money in people's pockets for them to spend. When the government has the low-income heating assistance program, LIHEAP, another brilliant name from the Democratic Party, that program pays for people. I know one of these guys in Vermont. A friend of mine. In fact, I voiced a spot for his little, it's just a couple-person company. And they go around to houses, and they got one of these contraptions where they look at the infrared signature of the house to see where the heat is escaping, and then they caulk places, and they put insulation in, and they make your house efficient. And it costs a few $100 or a few $1,000, and what do you save over 5-10 years is thousands and thousands of dollars in heating bills. And it reduces the demand for oil, which is probably the major source of heating in the Northeast, in Vermont anyway. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. You cut those programs, and you're going to put these people out of work who are doing this, insulating, or you cut the program to, Meals for Wheels for seniors. There's people who are driving those cars, making those meals, and delivering those meals. You cut home health care aides, home health care for people who are disabled. You're cutting jobs in every one of these cases. In other words, this is an anti-jobs program. Cutting federal spending increases unemployment. There is not a Republican or Democrat who doesn't understand that. The Democrats are complaining about it, but they feel like, without the support of the White House, what can they do? And the Republicans are not going to say it out loud because they don't want to point out that what they're trying to do is crash the economy so that in 2012, when they run against President Obama, they can say, hey, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And people will have forgotten that 4 years ago, George Bush was losing 800,000 jobs a month and the Dow was at 6,000. Because they'll be in so much pain then. Now, how did we get here? Back in December of last year, the president and the Democrats were pushing for an extension of unemployment benefits. What they eventually negotiated with the Republicans was a fairly weak extension, B, something that didn't help the 99ers, but it did push it out for a year, at least till the end of this year, although a lot of people are rolling off right now. But it pushed it out for a year. What did the Republicans want in exchange for that? 2 for 1. They wanted 2 years of the Bush tax cuts. Now, at that point, what the Democrats should have said, or what the White House should have said, is, you want 2 years of the Bush tax cuts? It's going to come with a steep price. You're going to have to give us the debt ceiling right now. In fact, when President Obama held his press conference about that deal that they worked out, 2 years extension of the Bush tax cut, 1 year extension of unemployment last December, I'm sorry, I don't remember which reporter it was, but some report, I remember this moment. A reporter stood up and said to the president, shouldn't the debt ceiling be on the table here? Aren't the Republicans just going to come around and whack you upside the head again with the debt ceiling? Words to that effect. And the president didn't, he was like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. We got to track down that clip. And so there have been multiple opportunities, but the biggest one was the most recent. And he should have just said, we don't negotiate with hostage takers.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.